Pretoria says it's concerned by reports that some South Africans are considering joining the Israeli Defence Force in the Gaza offensive and other occupied Palestinian territories. The government says this could potentially contribute to the violation of international law and the commission of international crimes, thus making them liable for prosecution in South Africa. For more on this discussion, we're now joined by Advocate André Stemmet, the Senior State Law Advisor in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Advocate Stemmet, I appreciate your time this evening. Now, what specific concerns does the South African government have regarding its citizens joining the Israeli Defence Forces in the conflict with Gaza in the occupied Palestinian territories?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I think let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution in Section 198 provides for the desire for all South Africans to live in peace and harmony. So that's a lodestar in the South African Constitution. And you will recall that the previous government was often involved in conflict in the neighboring states. And I think that inspired the provision in the Constitution in Section 198. And that also inspired what we refer to as the Regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act of 1998, which was adopted by Parliament in 1998. Now, the idea behind the act is to prevent South Africans from getting involved in conflicts. You will also recall that many South Africans of the old Defence Force became privatized, and they established private military and security companies, and these were involved in neighboring states, in other states in Africa. And the government at the time felt that this kind of foreign military assistance should be regulated. And it is regulated in the Foreign Military Assistance Act of 1998. So what the government has done, what the department has done today, was to send out a reminder to South African nationals and permanent residents that there are legal consequences should they join the Israeli Defence Force and get involved in the conflict in Gaza. So it's basically a warning to people in South Africa and to our fellow South Africans that they may be transgressing, and they will be transgressing South African domestic law should they become involved as members of the IDF in the conflict in Gaza.
Now, I suppose you talked about the Constitution as a starting point, but let's rewind a little bit. For this statement to be issued, it would suggest that it's not a handful of individuals, but it's potentially a huge number of South Africans that are considering joining the IDF. Do we have an idea on the number or the source of the intelligence?
No, we do not have specific numbers, but we have heard that there are South Africans who consider joining the IDF. And irrespective of the number of people involved, the law will apply to each and every citizen. It also provides for both natural persons, that's people, citizens, or juristic persons, companies getting involved. So it's got a fairly widespread in that respect. And whether it's a few or many getting involved, the principle remains the same. People who do transgress the act may be liable for conviction in terms of the provisions of the act. So it's more a kind of a friendly warning to our South African nationals that they should be very careful and be aware that there's an act like this that's applicable to them.
Advocate Stemmet, don't want to harp on the issue, but I'd imagine that if one or two people were talking in the pub about joining the IDF, it would not warrant for Pretoria to make a statement.
Look, I didn't get into a pub so often that I would know what they were talking about in a pub. But I think you're trying to ask whether we've got reliable information. As far as I know, it is reliable information, but I'm not, I'm a legal advisor. I'm not really privy to the information that came the way of the department. From where I sit, from our perspective, is the government, I think, is responsible if it warns citizens that certain actions of theirs may transgress South African domestic law, and it is in fact a way for people to be informed in order that they can protect themselves.
Now, there's something called the National Conventional Arms Control Committee, right? So, according to the
Yes.
regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act, what is the process for a person wishing to render foreign military assistance in Israel, and what role does the NCACC play in this process?
Yeah, the National Conventional Arms Control Committee was established by another act that, as its name indicates, provide licenses for the export of conventional arms. But it's also in this act the statutory body to which people must and institutions, companies that wish to provide foreign military assistance as it's defined in the act must apply for consideration. And what the committee will then do is to look at the application and look at the provisions of the act and the requirements for providing foreign military assistance, and then we'll make a recommendation to the Minister of Defence and military veterans. So unless a company or an individual has permission from the Minister to provide foreign military assistance, unless they have that permission, they will be acting illegally if they provide services that can be defined as foreign military assistance. And the foreign military assistance is defined fairly widely in the act. So people must be careful that they do not act in a way that their actions will fall under the definition of foreign military assistance.
Now, is there any intelligence or information to suggest that the Israeli Defence Forces are actively recruiting South Africans to join the IDF?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so let's talk about how the South African Citizenship Act addresses the issue of South African citizens engaging in wars that the Republic does not support or agree with.
Yes, the Citizenship Act provides that in such a situation where somebody participates in such a war, then it may be a basis for the lifting of such a person's citizenship. So there's an added risk as a South African citizen to be taking part in a foreign armed conflict.
Advocate Stemmet, you mentioned that the government or Pretoria was issuing a friendly warning to South African citizens. But let's talk about what legal consequences they would face, the South African citizens, if they did join the IDF without the required permissions, considering the potential violation of international law and commission of international crimes.
Yes, I think it's Section 9 of the Act that provides that if a person will provide what is defined as foreign military assistance without the required permission from the Minister of Defence, that it will be an offence. And upon conviction, a person can be laid up, fine, or even imprisoned, or both. So there's definitely a sanction in the Act as well. And that's why, it's not a warning, it's a friendly reminder to our nationals to be very careful and to go and read the Act and consider carefully whether they would like to get involved in an armed conflict in a foreign state.
So I suppose the next question to ask is, how do we know if any number of South Africans join the IDF? Is that information public knowledge? I suppose we would be able to pick up if all of a sudden hundreds of South Africans were leaving the shores and headed to Israel. But what if South Africans are coming from other parts of the world or are already in Israel and wanting to join the IDF? Is there any way of actually knowing this?
Look, I think the principle that the Act provides for is simple. If the link to the Act is citizenship or permanent residence. Whether it can be proved in a court is another matter. For that one needs information, for that one needs witness statements, for that one needs maybe open source information. That is something that the South African Police Services, together with the NPA, will investigate in each individual case. But of course, you are right. It is often difficult to get good evidence material where transgressions often takes place abroad. That's always a bit of a problem for the law enforcing agencies to be able to prove, because it takes place extraterritorially. But the important thing is that the Act has extraterritorial reach. So what a South African citizen or a juristic person or permanent resident does in a foreign country, while providing foreign military assistance in an armed conflict, and I think nobody will even contest that there's an armed conflict in Gaza ongoing, that if that happened, there is jurisdictional reach from South Africa to the provision of military assistance. Now,
the Israel-Hamas war has been ongoing since that attack on October 7th, right? So it's almost a couple of months. But it's not the only conflict that is going on globally. I mean, we know what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. We know what's happening in the DRC and in Sudan and many other parts of the world. Does South Africa, does Pretoria hold the same stance on its citizens joining various other armed forces as it does the IDF?
Yes, absolutely. The Act provides for participation or for foreign military assistance with respect to an armed conflict, whether an international armed conflict, that's an armed conflict between states, as is the case with Russia and Ukraine, or a non-international armed conflict, which is a conflict between state and armed groups, or armed groups inside a state. So the definition of armed conflict is wide enough to cover all these conflicts that you've just referred to. So anybody that's a South African citizen or a permanent resident that participates or provides foreign military assistance to any of these conflicts will be transgressing the Act if there was not the proper approval from the Minister of Defence. So the Act has an extraterritorial reach, as we've said, and it reaches to all situations that can be described as an armed conflict.
Thank you for staying with us. You're watching News Feed, the PM edition. I'm in conversation with Advocate André Stemmet, the Senior State Law Advisor in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And our conversation really has been around the communique issued by Pretoria around South African citizens that may want to join the IDF, which is the Israeli Defence Forces. Now, Advocate Stemmet, before we went on the break, my question was, why has Pretoria not issued a similar communique on the other conflicts across the globe that are currently in place, or have we missed it?
I cannot recall specifically when and whether we have issued the similar statements with respect to other conflicts. I do recall that the issue of participation by South Africans in the Russian-Ukraine conflict at the time was an issue that was in the news. So I can well imagine that the department has issued a similar statement at the time. I think also one must bear in mind that the Gaza conflict is at the moment on all our television screens. It's on radio. We're all aware of it. And there is definitely a heightened awareness of what's going on in Gaza at the moment. And I think that to a large extent has also inspired the decision to issue the statement. But once again, the statement is not a warning. The statement is not a threat. The statement is a reminder to South Africans to protect themselves from actions that may get them in trouble later on. So it's because we've got the well-being of our citizens in mind, and that's for our department. A large part of its work actually is to assist South Africans who are in trouble abroad and to provide consular services to them. So we are keenly aware thereof that our citizens, our people who go abroad get into trouble, and we want to prevent that. So I think that's the reason behind the statement.
Now, which government arm is responsible for enforcing this reminder? So obviously you've put it out there, or you're speaking on behalf of it as DIRCO, but whose responsibility is it for ensuring that these individuals, these South African citizens, do not join the IDF, and that if they do join the IDF, they're prosecuted?
Yeah, as I've said earlier, I think that is a matter for investigation by the South African Police Services. And then for prosecution, if there's the basis by the National Prosecuting Authority. So then it moves on. When it comes to law enforcement, it moves on from our department to those state agencies.
Now, final thoughts on this, Advocate Stemmet. What work is being done by DIRCO or the South African government to create the necessary advocacy or put out the information? Obviously, we are having this conversation, but beyond this channel, what happens to South Africans that you would like to remind of this that might be in Israel or anywhere else across the globe?
Well, we've reached out by means of this statement, and it's on the department's website. It's widely reported, as you are doing at the moment. So we hope it will reach not only South Africans that may consider taking part in this conflict and in other conflicts, but also South Africans that may live in Israel and while they remain South African citizens, will be within the jurisdictional reach of the Act.
And finally, can we expect the closure of the Israeli embassy in the not too distant future?
That is a policy decision that will be made by government. I cannot comment on it. I'm not privy to the decision-making process of the government in this respect. So I can unfortunately not give you enlightenment there.
Advocate Stemmet, appreciate your time this evening. DIRCO's Senior State Law Advisor, Advocate André Stemmet, in conversation with us around government's notice or reminder, as he calls it, on the illegalities of joining the Israeli Defence Force.